Good evening, friends. Just a lot later than what you expected. Dan has to be a dad and live his life. Still has an alive kid at the house right now who may be making a guest appearance. Welcome to the Massillon Fantasy League show. Ryan, Dan, here with you. How are you doing tonight, my friend?
Great. As soon as these kids will go to sleep, but
It's
so far.
funny. I've seen this joke online a bunch where when you're a kid, you have to be forced to go to sleep. And when you're an adult, it's all you want to do. And as Dan knows, I'm falling asleep on the show tonight. It's almost 100%. I collapse, and Dan has to just figure out how to end the show and do the whole thing by himself. Dan, it was an interesting week 10.
I'll let the show keep going just everybody can just watch you sleep. Those of you that are really good friends with you, Ryan, they've seen you sleep before.
That's true. Another interesting thing that's going to happen, I mentioned this on one of my shows this week. Oh, shit. Half an hour late, Rob P shows up to the party. We got our champ in the chat. How you doing, my friend? I mentioned this to my other shows this week. They are working on the railroad tracks that are like 50 yards from my house, not even 50, right behind my house. And this clock fell down this week, which is why it's terribly off center right now. So there's a non-zero chance at some point during a show, this clock is just going to fall and knock me straight the fuck out. And it's going to make comedy gold for some show that someone's on with me. That's for sure. Rob P appreciates the love, Dan.
Hey man, you've earned it. You're dominating this year. All the work you put in, taking those L's last year, it's all paid off, man. Bobby wins.
I was to say Bobby wins might be the. I'm trying to think. Is he the epitome of a rebuild in this league? I don't think we've had anybody who was willing just to eat those L's and then. I guess what I'm saying is worst to first. Now I do know Brian literally went worst, or maybe he went first to worst. I might be wrong.
So I don't know if he ate L's. So I felt like he really worked hard last year to try and make his team better, but then he also did a good job of adding to his picks, making the right moves. He made all the right moves for 2 years to get to this point. He has earned it. I'm still happy you're not going undefeated. I don't want to see that, but happy for you, my guy.
All right.
Respect.
I think I'm right here. I'm going to check. Yes, Brian in 2015 to 2016. Now, Rob P wasn't worst last year, if I remember correctly, but Brian in 2015 to 2016 went worst to first. So there's something. But I do like the Bobby Wins nickname. Dan, week 10 in the books. It was a weird one. Kenny heard Darren say that he may not get another win the rest of the year. And like Michael Jordan, he took that personally. So Kenny busts out a 185.65, which is the high score for the season. Kyler Murray, 20-plus points. Bijan Robinson, 20-plus. Every player on his team, at least 5 points. Tight end was the position that let him down, but that doesn't matter when your defense puts up 28 points. Just a great week for Kenny. Spoiler alert, when we get to the playoff teams, Darren still does not have Kenny in his playoffs, sitting at 7-3 right now. Is it time that we put a little respect on this team?
So here's the thing. I think this is personal at this point. Because if you look at Kenny's upcoming schedule, he has some games he better win. Like, not like, a tough matchup. I think he's playing Taylor at one point, which is a win for just about everybody. So him and Darren play each other next week. And then he has Taylor after that. So that's a win right there for Taylor.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible to say that. So, yeah, I never even made that consideration. Rob P points out that he won the toilet bowl last year. So congratulations. We don't really look at the toilet bowl much, except that it did win you some money and points towards the first pick. So it clearly worked out really fucking well for you. So maybe I can stop wallowing in my sorrows that's likely the spot that I'm playing for this season. Dan, low score last week was Mott's again. I'm not going to pick on Mott's. He set a lineup. It wasn't a great week. You beat him by 66 points. But I do think that Phil and Eric are probably looking in the mirror. Week 10 is not the time to have a 70-63 battle in this league. And I understand bye weeks and Brock Bowers was out. T. Higgins hasn't played in a while, but 70-63 in week 10, that's a rough matchup for Phil and Eric last week.
Yeah, there's a few if you're scoring around what Taylor's scoring, you're probably in some trouble.
Yeah, you can't be in the Taylor Motts level when they have openly sold out. So,
I agree.
what's funny is we were giving Eric all this love that it just wasn't shaking out for him, but it certainly didn't shake out for him last week. He did come out at the bottom of that matchup as well. So Eric is having a very Steve Horvath season, though. He earned that loss last week without a doubt. Dan, anything else you picked up in week 10?
Just this battle for these last 2 playoff spots and how crazy this is going to be down to the wire, I think.
Yeah. Another spoiler alert. I've updated my projections. I think it's going to, I know you said you didn't. I think it's going to take 9 wins to get in now.
Oh, I disagree with you on that one.
Just based on how this schedule is shaking out, I hope I'm wrong, but I don't even think I can force a tie. Not that I could win a tie. Dan, let's talk about these trades. You and Darren, the only active managers at the trade deadline, buying from Greg, JR, and Taylor. So let's talk about Darren's 2 trades first. Darren gives up a 1, a 2, Mahomes and Worthy for Hurts, Higgins, Bateman, and Travis Kelce. There's an 8 and a 6 in there, but I'm not going to talk about that. And then he also buys Rachaad White for a 2. So at the end of the day, Darren gave up a 1 and 2 2s to essentially buy an entirely new lineup that he needs, but Hurts, Rachaad White, Higgins, Bateman, and Travis Kelce, giving up Mahomes and Xavier Worthy. What's your take on what Darren did?
Yeah, great move. Great move. I was working on a similar trade with Eric for some of those guys as well. Couldn't get the job done like Darren did. So good for him.
I said Greg. It was Eric, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I put it in my notes as Greg. That's just me fucking up. So
it's all right. You're drunk and tired.
I'm not drunk. I barely drink anymore. I am fucking exhausted though.
Guys, Ryan had to work an hour today. He's beat.
I did. An hour ago, I worked an hour answering fantasy questions for a whole hour, Dan.
No, I think a great move for Darren. Kelce looks like Kelce again.
Yeah.
Hurts with his rushing touchdowns is back to being Hurts. I mean,
yeah, Phil's got to be eating his words about the. Actually, was it Phil? Was it Phil and Rob P? I don't remember who I was arguing with, claiming that the brotherly shove was over, because that certainly is not the case anymore.
Phil was definitely involved in that. I can't remember if Bobby Wins was there.
Yeah, Rob, own up to it in the chat if you were doubting Jalen Hurts. Take that L. It's only your second one of the whole season. And then Dan, you went out and bought wide receivers. And I love the value you got on these 2 guys. Calvin Ridley for a 5, Mike Evans for a 4. But I look at your roster, and while everybody in the world needs depth, I don't think you needed wide receiver depth. I'm not saying they weren't good moves. I do think they're good moves. I just don't think you needed them. I think you needed a running back.
Try to get a running back. Couldn't. I disagree on the needing wide receiver depth. Michael Pittman has been hot garbage this entire season. I trust him to score as many fantasy points as I do you this week. If you were an NFL player, he's not been good. He's like the number 63 overall fantasy wide receiver right now.
Yeah,
I have zero trust for him. I like Mooney.
I was gonna say, I guess I just see Mooney, Puka, and Brian Thomas Jr. And obviously Brian Thomas has been very miss lately, especially with Mac Jones taking over last week. So
I absolutely love Brian Thomas. I love him going into the future. Once it was announced that it doesn't look like Trevor Lawrence is going to play anymore this year, I can't go out there with him and hope for him to have.
Well, and then the silver lining,
great game. I mean,
I say now the silver lining, they're saying Lawrence is coming back after the bye. So you
might actually. If he does, great. I have options. I'll probably pick the wrong guy and start the wrong guy, but that's it. That's a future problem of mine.
I was gonna say
future Metzger will deal with that. I like Mike Evans, especially with Godwin being hurt for the rest of the year. I think he should see a ton of targets.
And if Mike Evans gives a shit, 97 yards per game keeps him in his 1,000 yard streak. So.
And I think he probably does care about that. But I think Calvin Ridley, he's been really good lately.
Been great.
If those 2 can continue and can carry me with Puka, I like those chances. Joe, I hate waste. I had to do something because, Joe Burrow's going to end the year probably number one quarterback. You have that on your team. You got to go for it, man. That's hard to find.
Do something before the window closes. I get it.
I want to do more. Just can't force the trade, man. Takes two to tango.
That's true. All right, let me get the league up here on the chat. Talk about some matchups, Dan. So last week I went 4-3. You and Darren both went 5-2, Dan. That puts me and you in a tie, 40-30 through 10 weeks, with Darren one game behind, 39-31. So the predictions have been competitive and fun this year, even if the games have not. There's one game of note, in my opinion. I mean, obviously, a lot of games matter for a lot of people, but there's one game of note, in my opinion. So we will keep it in the order that Sleeper gives it to us. You got me, Dan, taking on Phil, 4-6 versus 5-5. Right now, Sleeper has me projected to win this game by 19 points. What's your initial takeaways?
I was quite surprised to see you give up on your quarterback already.
Yeah, fuck Caleb Williams.
You gave up a lot to get him.
Certainly did. Every mid-round pick I had extra.
I think I might clip out like a 30-second window of that trade actually happening on air. Or that was a different trade, wasn't it?
That was the buy from Taylor trade.
Gotcha.
I was still very excited about the Caleb Williams trade.
I was hoping that was the trade because I would love to have a 30-second snippet we could just play on the show every so often when you give a bad opinion on something.
Yeah.
Anyway, no, I was shocked to see you gave up on him. Went with Russell Wilson. Probably a good play. Baltimore's defense is tough. We'll see. I expect you to get the win though. Phil's team scored 70 last week. They'll probably score 70 again. My guess is they're going to score every week for the bad karma of this guy owing me a couple dozen wings and never paying up. But
so karma's getting Phil until he takes care of that. So
I think so. I think Phil needs to pay some dues and
he better not get
some Massillon folks some wings.
He better not buy you any food tomorrow. That's all I'm saying. Dan, I have this honestly as a pretty easy win for me when I do my little breakdown. Christian McCaffrey seems to be back. Didn't score a touchdown last week and still had a great week. Decent lineup. I'm making the ballsy call of Cedric Tillman over Tyreek Hill. I just have this weird feeling about Tyreek Hill in this Raiders game. I might still end up changing it before tomorrow. Drake London doesn't have a great matchup this week, so I have options at wide receiver, as you mentioned. Don't love Derek Carr. Basically, I just like my matchups. I like my players a little bit better on this one. Darren also picks me. I'll be interested to see, Dan. Darren and I only disagree on the game of the week, so I'll be interested to see if it's a similar situation with you. Speaking of Darren has Rob Motz this week. It's a one of the league's best taking on a tanking team, though Rob is projected to actually score some points this week. He hasn't recently. Darren got 13 points out of Jalen Hurts. I have Rob losing again. I have Darren win this one. I think Stroud could bounce back this week against a very suspect Dallas defense. He could match Jalen Hurts. Hurts didn't do a ton on Thursday. However, Darren has advantages at running back 2, wide receiver 2. So when I look at that, Cortland Sutton versus Christian Watson, I like that in Darren's favor. And then running back 2 is the Devon Achane versus Justice Hill. Big win there. And even the Travis Kelce versus Mike Gesicki. Just a lot of wins there that Motz isn't going to be able to overcome. I am happy to see Nico Collins back for Motz, but I just don't think this is going to be an upset week for him. I'd love to see it.
I know you can put some points on Dallas's defense, but that pass rush is still good, especially with Parsons. And the Texans' offensive line is just not. So I expect it to be another low-scoring game. If you told me that Motz is going to get 20-plus points out of Stroud, I would say Motz would win.
Ooh.
Just because I think Jalen only getting 13 could potentially really hurt Darren there. But I don't expect Stroud to have that kind of game, so I'm going to say I expect Darren to take the win.
Yep. We'll be skipping Kenny and Rob P and coming back to that one. So Dan, it is you versus Eric. I wouldn't call Eric a tanking team. He was a seller there for a little while, but right now he is actually projected to beat you by 6 points. However, you don't have an IDP in your lineup as it stands. On the Thursday night game, Eric's IDP pulled 15.5 points. Zach Bond is a fucking beast when it comes to tackles right now. So when I look at this one, Dan, I just don't think there's anything for Eric to really come back there. By the way, I picked Darren and Darren picked Darren as well. I guess this could be an interesting matchup just based on the projections, but I just think your wide receivers are in better spots this week, so it was a pretty easy choice for me to pick you in this one. And
I'm gonna pick myself as well. I'll have Myles Garrett in there.
Oh yeah, I know.
Here soon. I'm not happy about Bond getting 15. Although I'm happy for him as a person. I loved him coming out of college at Wisconsin. I thought he was going to be really good early on in his career. It hasn't happened. Maybe he's a late developer. But
him and Nakobe Dean are just feeding off of one another, and it's looking really good out there in Philly.
Yeah. Like I said, loved him in college, so it's pretty cool to see him finally get some success. Happy for him. Wish it wouldn't have been this week, but
yeah,
it is what it is. I think I'll pull the win, though.
Yeah, it doesn't need too much analysis. I just love your wide receivers. Darnell Mooney. I'm blanking. Patrick Surtain's going to cover Drake London. I think Mooney had that Achilles scare, but I think he's going to be fine. And then Puka Nacua versus Jalen Waddle and Kayshon Boutte. I'm just not in on that whatsoever. And then honestly, Taysom Hill is such a hit or miss prospect. Just that middle there for you. And then Myles Garrett can easily match those 15 points off of 2 plays if it falls the right way.
Yeah, I'll be putting Calvin Ridley in for Keenan Allen. But.
There you go. Yeah. Our 2 last place teams in this league: Horvath 3-7, taking on Taylor 11-2. Obviously, we don't want to spend, 11-2, 2-6. He scored 11.2 points, so 2-8 he is. Taylor gets only 10 points out of Jaden Daniels and only 1 point out of Noah Brown. Taylor's obviously scrounging lineup spots at this point. He knows what he's getting himself into. Taylor hates football right now. I can say that for a fact. So. This is another ugly week for him, and I have Horvath pulling this one out, Dan. Taylor needed more from Daniels, plain and simple, and then I think that Minnesota stack of Justin Jefferson and Sam Darnold is going to work out well for Horvath.
See, I disagree. I think that the Sam Darnold start, it makes me the most nervous about this game to pick Horvath. I want to pick Horvath. CeeDee Lamb might not play. I don't trust Darnold. You know what? I'm going to go Taylor. Taylor's going to get the win.
So here's what's hilarious. I promise. I meant to type Horvath, and I typed Taylor for you. So I thought you were going to pick Horvath 100%, and clearly my brain knew better that you were going to pick Taylor. So there you go. What could have been a good matchup in any other week? 6-4, Steve Weiss versus 9-1 Greg, but I can't discount Rob P versus Kenny this week. They even got good play out of their Thursday game. Right now, Steve Weiss projected to win this game by 32 because he got 29.3 out of Saquon Barkley, but it's not like, 5 points out of Devonta Smith. You wanted more than that, but 10 points out of the Eagles defense is not bad for a defense. It certainly didn't put Greg in a terrible spot. Where do you have this one shaken out, Dan?
I'm going to go Steve. It's hard to look at that whole lineup and know he already has 30 from Saquon, and not expect him to get that win. Aaron Jones is still a good NFL running back. He's not great fantasy-wise. I think 3 straight weeks of less than 10 points. So when I just look at that whole matchup and look at Steve's, he makes me nervous having Bo Nix in there. That'll keep the game close, but I'm going to take Steve to get the win.
I like Nix. I don't know what his stats have been in our league, but he's been doing well in real fantasy. And not that ours isn't real. We just have the slim down QB scoring. 16, 11, 32 weeks ago, but then 8 the week before that. So, he certainly has a dud still in his repertoire. You're absolutely right there. I wanted to ask you about Purdy versus Jordan Love, Dan. This is a situation you've kind of been in, not necessarily with Brock Purdy, but the Jordan Love in-out situation. Both have decent matchups this week. Love is in Chicago. Brock Purdy is at home against Seattle. Right now, Greg has Purdy going. Does starting Jordan Love, would that change anything for you in that one?
I like Purdy a lot more than Love right now.
Okay. I think that like I said, I like Purdy a lot this week as well. I think it's a very much a plus matchup. I also have Stevie winning this one. And as I mentioned, Darren agrees, and I have it for the exact reason you said. Saquon is such a huge advantage to already be on the books. So there are other spots that are close. It's a tough look for Greg leaving Austin Eckler on the bench, but I don't think we really expected Eckler to have such a hot Thursday night. Just not a good matchup at all for Greg, and it's likely to be his second loss of the season. We got Terry taking on JR, the Honey Badger. JR was a seller, but again, a seller with a high projection this week. Terry's sitting at 5-5, JR sitting at 4-6. There are a ton of playoff implications here. Terry got 1.5 points out of Terry McLaurin on Thursday. Not very happy with his namesake, I would imagine right now. Dan, how do you got this one playing out?
I'm gonna go JR for the win here. I think Terry kind of relies on Derrick Henry at big games. I think it'll be tough for him against that Pittsburgh defense this week. I like Jared Goff going against that Jacksonville defense. So I'm gonna go with JR to get the win. That 1.5 hurts Terry.
Yeah, it definitely does. I actually have Terry surviving it. Terry's QB and running backs are too fucking good. And then George Kittle, when you go down to the tight end matchup, assuming Kittle's healthy, Kittle's been such a beast since Brandon Ayuk has been out and Dalton Schultz hasn't been that. I think that's a big advantage. I wanted to ask you again on this one. Now you have JR winning. Do you think he again is making the right decision? Jared Goff versus Kirk Cousins. Cousins has that game in Denver, whereas Goff is at home against a very suspect Jacksonville defense. My worry about Goff, Dan, is if Detroit gets out to an early lead, Detroit is not afraid to just keep giving the ball to Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. This could be a very quiet Jared Goff game if this turns into a blowout with Mac Jones.
I mean, it could, but I worry about the health of the Atlanta Falcons offense going into the tough place to play in Denver. They're a dome team. You're getting into mid to late November out in the mountains. I would go with Jared Goff there.
Interesting. I don't have my rankings in front of me. I wonder how I have them ranked. Game of the week, Dan, I think has to be 7-3 versus 9-1. Kenny's had this game circled for a long, long time. By the way, Darren and I both agreed that it was Terry in that last one. So Darren, you've went against us twice. So there's going to be a change in the standings this week, almost certainly. 15.05 for Kenny on Thursday night, 19-9 for Bobby Wins on Thursday night, 11.6 out of Brian Robinson, 8.25 out of AJ Brown. Kind of average days for both of those players. The 8.05 comes out of Dallas Goedert. Again, pretty average day, I would say, on Thursday in this matchup, Dan. Everybody did what they're supposed to do. And I'm going to go ahead, and this is the only game that Darren and I disagree this week. I'm picking Kenny, whereas Darren is taking Bobby Wins. I think it is a close game. I think this is probably a championship preview. I think Kenny has a small edge at wide receiver, and that's going to be able to make up for a likely gap at quarterback. I like Justin Herbert this week, but it's hard to ever like Justin Herbert as much as you like Lamar Jackson. However, that 8 points out of AJ Brown, Jamar Chase is likely to do that on the first drive. I don't mind Josh Downs no matter who the quarterback is, and I like him more than Roma Dunze. And then the flex is the Dallas Goedert. I didn't even realize that wasn't even the tight end. So, but Audric Estime, he's a tough pick. He's likely to see the volume in Denver, but we don't really know what Denver's doing. I think there's enough edge for Kenny to make up for whatever Lamar Jackson is going to beat Justin Herbert by. Darren disagrees.
So I'm actually going to Kenny as well, and I don't think that Lamar Jackson beats Justin Herbert this week. I think Justin Herbert actually wins that battle. The Bengals defense is shredded cheese. I think Herbert could have a big game against them. And I think Lamar going against Pittsburgh is a tough matchup. If this wasn't, Bobby Wynn's rough bye week, I would take him. But him missing a lot of guys this weekend, having to start some guys I don't think he would normally start.
Yeah, I'm scrolling it on the screen right now. My man is down. Chuba, Marvin Harrison, Malik Neighbors, Jalen Coker is not. I mean, he's come on as of late, but not.
I'm more talking about the other guys there.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely having to put Roma Dunze in your matchup against this. Now, maybe Chicago bounces back with this offensive coordinator. It was a tough cut on Caleb Williams this week, but I can't fuck around. I mean, in all honesty, I'm paying for wins right now that are probably inconsequential in the long run, but I'm a better team with Russell Wilson and Geno Smith, and I was never going to keep Caleb. But it was just such an awful trade and such a bad mistake on my part, but shit happens. But no, I like Justin Herbert as well. I was going to give him more credit, but the Bengals have been certainly rough to watch on defense. And Dan, it is time to talk the playoffs. So Darren and I only have one disagreement. Mine are the same as they were last week. It's Rob P and Stevie getting the bye week, which, by the way, Sleeper doesn't show it that I can see. They've clinched playoff spots. They can only lose. Oh, they can lose 5 games, not 4. That's why they haven't clinched. Never mind. They have not clinched playoff spots. They can clinch this week. I thought they put stars, and I'm like, why don't they have stars yet? But in my head, 9-4, I'm thinking 5 years ago's rules. Anyway, Rob P and Stevie with the buys, Kenny, Greg, Darren, and Terry. And Darren disagrees and has you still getting in over Kenny. So he has yourself in, Metzger, over Kenny. My champ is still Stevie. I'm not going to change it. And as I mentioned, my one note is I think it's 9 wins to get into the playoffs now, which you obviously disagree with.
I think 8 still gets you in. I mean, you look at – I don't see Terry, Darren, myself, or Phil going 4-0 down the stretch. Terry and I play each other still. One of us is taking a loss there. Phil's team scores 70 points a week. He's going to take multiple losses. So then you're saying that either me or Terry, the winner of our game, is going to go 4-0.
I have Terry going 4-0.
And Darren going 4-0 down the stretch.
I have Darren going 4-0 down the stretch.
I mean, we need to break that down itself. So,
I mean, we will over the next 3 weeks. Who are your playoff teams, Dan?
I'm gonna go ahead and make a little change to mine and say that I have Greg and Bobby Wins taking the top 2 seeds, followed by Kenny, Steve, and I'm gonna go Darren and myself.
Okay. So you take Terry out, Darren takes Kenny out, and I take you out. So what we do agree on is Darren, Greg, Stevie, and Rob P. Those guys are in. Who's your champ right now, Dan?
Oh, Bobby Wins.
Bobby Wins. I had a feeling you weren't going to be changing that. Well, Dan, we do get to end the show with good news, as you were the only one who put together a semblance of the flex competition last week, as you took down 33 points. You were carried by your quarterback pick, who I can't remember who it was. Oh, Jalen Hurts. You were carried by Jalen Hurts, where me and Darren both did terrible. Nobody else participated last week. Bobby Wins, if you're still in the chat, drop who your favorite quarterback in flex play is this week of everybody in the league. If you get the most points, we announce you as the winner on the show. Dan, that is your 3rd win of the season. Nobody else has more than 2. You want me to go first? You want to take the honors this week?
Go right ahead, sir. Do your thing.
All right. Dan, I went weird this week. I've been picking a little bit too chalky. Chalky doesn't always hit. And we mentioned that we liked him earlier in the show. I'm taking Brock Purdy as my number 1 quarterback. I think that's going to be a shootout with the Seattle Seahawks. Geno Smith has actually passed for the most yards per game in the NFL right now. Christian McCaffrey's back, but they used him very well as a receiver in that first week. I think they're going to come out throwing again. Brock Purdy threw for 353 yards last week, only 2 touchdowns. I think he has the 3rd touchdown. And speaking of touchdown scores, it's been 2 weeks since we've seen Kyren Williams find the end zone. So I'm going with my boy Kyren, taking on New England, one of the worst run-stopping defenses in the league right now. I think he gets in the end zone at least twice, and that's what it takes to take down a competition like this. Give me Brock Purdy. Kyren Williams, Dan, is the best quarterback and flex play of the week.
I'm going to go Joe Burrow and Christian McCaffrey.
Did your baby just cheer when you said Joe Burrow?
He did. He knows.
Does he already know what's up in your house?
Yes, he does.
And Rob P going directly at you. Rob P's first time participating this season in the competition, saying Burrow and Chase. So you guys are going Jamar Chase versus CMC, which is a battle for the ages in fantasy football. I love those picks. Dan, talk to me about Joe Burrow. You mentioned you guys can't stop anybody, and that tends to facilitate him needing to throw more. Chargers have, on paper, a tough defense. You don't think that's going to matter for a red-hot Joe Burrow right now?
No, I mean, if you look at how he's playing this year, I don't think that's gonna matter much to him. I think getting T. Higgins back is just going to make the offense even more explosive. So I expect to be a high-scoring, entertaining Sunday night game.
Yeah, I'm expecting the exact same thing. And then obviously I'm hoping we get to see Christian McCaffrey as a better runner this week. I think he was sub 4 yards a carry, maybe even sub 3.5 yards per carry. Look good as a receiver, and those division matchups tend to bring out the best in McCaffrey.
I mean, I'm personally hopeful that he's going to get like less than 5 points total. I'm just preparing myself for the likely success of him and you getting a win. I hope he just scores 5. You take a loss. Your season's over.
I'm hoping for the first time on this show, I don't have to change my team name for the rest of this season, because I am undefeated with Christian McCaffrey. 1-0, baby. Technically 2-0, because in another league I promise you, Dan, first time in my fantasy career, 0-9, because I had Higgins and McCaffrey. And I'm now 1-0 with Christian McCaffrey in that league. My first win of the season is McCaffrey's first year back. Our first week back it's been a rough one. But
love to see it.
Hopefully I can also win out. I still don't think me winning out gets me anywhere near the playoffs, but Dan disagrees. That is the week 11 show. Bobby wins. Thank you for riding with us the whole episode. I think you're the only one this week. That's okay. Everybody else is probably in bed, Dan, where grown-ass adults belong.
The Parkland's all in bed at 10 o'clock on a Saturday night. You guys got problems.
Oh, never mind. He switched his play. He didn't like having the same thing as you. So now he's going with the Baltimore stack of Lamar and Andrews. A tight end.
Respect.
Flex play is a ballsy call. I was actually checking this, Dan, to see if my Kyron Williams pick was a stupid pick. 10 weeks in the season, 4 have been running backs as the best flex play. 6 have been wide receivers as the best flex play. So wide receiver is the way to go. But I'm rooting for you, Rob P. Except I'm not, because I'm rooting for myself. Dan, parting words for our friends as we get out of here for the evening.
All right. Love you guys. Have a great weekend. I apologize a little later than normal, but it is what it is.
That apology is not for you guys. That apology is for me. I was falling asleep at this computer. Falling asleep. No, Dan, you got a lot going on right now, obviously. Just giving you a hard time. I hope everybody has a great weekend except for Phil. I'd be very much appreciative of 70 points again. But more importantly, I'm going to need my fantasy team to put up Kenny weeks for the next 4 weeks for me to even sniff any sort of chance at a tiebreaker. So I'm rooting for 187 this week. That way I murder Phil, Kenny's record, and I have a chance at the playoffs, Dan. That's what I'm going for. Thanks for tuning in. Bobby wins. I'm sure some of you guys will watch this show after the fact. Have a great Sunday. Unless your name is Phil. Talk to you guys next week.